Hello Orchid friends, welcome back to my channel. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, staying healthy and staying safe. Today we're going to look at one of my miniature Phalaenopsis orchid. This one was given to me by a colleague, and after my care, this is its first time rebloom with 2 spikes. And to be honest with you, I was not happy, I was not thrilled because yes, it's 2 spikes, but this orchid was so sensitive that it had so many bud blasts. My other orchids were doing okay. This one, I did not even move it from the moment that it started to form buds. However, it still had so many bud blasts that I had no idea why, and this was the only one in my entire collection, this flowering cycle, that it had bud blast. So I was still trying to figure out reasons, but I decided to make a video and to give you an update. Later in this video, you will also see my repot for this orchid. So it was due. It was definitely due, but I wanted to wait for 1 year so that I can observe how this orchid does and then repot if necessary. So that's what I did. Nonetheless, it bloomed after my care because it wouldn't have survived in the office environment. And the original owner, my colleague, was pleasantly surprised that this orchid was able to put out 2 spikes and rebloom under my care just under 1 year. So this is going back in time. This was when it was starting to put out 2 spikes. Originally, I had this orchid on a east-facing windowsill, and once I realized that this orchid was about to produce buds, I decided to move it away from the window and put it under one of my LED grow light on my orchid rack. And the reason for that is for the original space, I had other use for it, so I did not want this orchid to be there. I didn't think that would impact this orchid, and hopefully that didn't, because it was still pretty early on during the, it was still growing spikes essentially. And here you can see this orchid was doing a couple really weird things. For its first bud on the older spike was already blasting, and then one of the spikes decided to grow really crooked even though there was a directly light source above it, and then the other spike was really branchy, so it was doing a lot of different things. I probably should have pay more attention to this orchid while it was growing its spike, so maybe I could have better supported it with more clips, but it grew the way it did, and I thought, it's the first year, so I didn't want to do too much to it and just to see how it does. So I was pretty happy that it was growing 2 spikes and they're pretty branchy with lots of buds, but it started to have bud blast after I think the 3rd or 4th flower opened. And remember, I told you I did not move this orchid, so movement was definitely not a thing. And when I gave this orchid water, it was set amount of water that I just put it inside the cup, the container. I did not move this orchid at all, but it started to have bud blast, so I had to look for other reasons. But the thing is, my other Phalaenopsis orchids did not have this issue, so I think this orchid is just very sensitive to whatever. And it also could be, my other theory is, how sometimes orchids can adjust to an environment, but sometimes not right away, but eventually it will. So I'm hoping next year, even with the same care, it would do better. And I was joking in my Chinese video, for this video, Chinese version, I was joking that if next year it still has the same thing with this many bud blasts, orchids that do not do well, do not perform well, they do not belong to my collection. So I will probably just do some experiments to help with my learning, or I'll simply give it away to someone who may be able to, give this orchid better potential. So this is how it is. And after the flowers were getting ready to go away, starting to fade, I decided to give this orchid a repot. So this is what I did. Initially, I just put it in a 16-ounce plastic cup, soak it really well. That's how I usually do it before I repot an orchid, because I believe wetter medium or media is easier to remove than dry media. So I did that. And of course, when you soak your orchids, it's best that you use slightly lukewarm water. Don't just turn on your tap water. I mean, if it's summertime, it's probably fine. But if it's wintertime and you had to repot an orchid, the water may be too cold. So after soaking, I took it out, let it drip for a little bit, and then I took it out of the pot. And right from the get-go, immediately you can see the media was not looking so good. And I'm glad that repot when I did. So it was a mixture of bark chips and sphagnum moss. It was pretty old, and thankfully the roots were pretty decent. I had to trim away a few dead root tissues, but for the most part, the original roots were okay, and then it also had grown quite a bit of aerial roots under my care, so I decided to bend all of them and pop them into the media. And the media is a mixture of manto clay and hydrocorn. I believe the ratio is 1:1 for this particular orchid, and for the container I use, it's a 16-ounce plastic cup. I do have ventilation holes on the side. I think I drilled either 2 or 4 holes on the sides around the midsection of the cup, and then at the bottom there were 4 drainage holes as well. So this orchid really is, I mean, if you want to call it traditional setup, you can, but I know most of you know I like to double cup my orchid container. So the blue outer cup, it's primarily to reduce sunlight so I can avoid algae formation, but then if I double cup it, it also can work as a saucer, if you will. If I want excess water at the bottom, then it kind of converts back to semi-hydro if I want to, but if I don't want any extra water lingering at the bottom, then it is back to the traditional setup, except it's in organic media. So this orchid continued to grow after I repotted it, and you probably already saw earlier some roots were growing, new roots were growing into the media, so that's definitely a good sign. And at that time, it was still putting out new leaves. Yes, newer leaves are smaller than the original store-bought leaves, but it was getting bigger and bigger, as you can see here. So it was definitely on the right track to full recovery, whatever it was trying to recover from. To finish off this video, I would just say this orchid bloomed, yes, but I'm not completely happy. Hopefully next year it'll do better. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!